lesson 6, which is classroom management that makes sense. So many things you'll see about classroom management are about having, warm-ups and keeping the kids engaged, teaching bell to bell. All these things are helpful, but I feel like a lot of times they miss the hard issue, or they miss some of the really simple, obvious things that we can do. And so in classroom management, I think we've got to start off with what we can control. And the number one thing that we control is us. How do the distractions, how does this, just the fact that there's an assembly today, how does that affect me? Am I frazzled, irritated, ticked off? That's going to ripple out. That's going to affect the rest of the class. Or how do behavior issues bother you? For me, I would start off with this one. I'd get angry, thinking some kid's disrespecting me, doesn't value me. And my kids would learn that when I got silent, that's what was scary. Because my kids knew that when I got silent, that meant I was getting angry, and they didn't want to go there. And so they would know that. But then when I got home, I'd be like, oh, I failed my kids. I'm horrible. Such a bad teacher. I would just mope about it. And I would feel all this, and that's, I feel bad about having to get mean and be the mean teacher and all those things, because I want my kids to like me, and I want to be that teacher, and and I had to really work with what's going on inside of me, and so the question is, are you willing to work on your part? Are you willing to work on how distractions affect you? Because if you're getting ticked off that there's a football assembly or a basketball game and kids are missing your class for the third time in 2 weeks, and if you're just going to be in a tizzy about it and just pissed off, that's really not going to help your class. That's really going to turn kids off. And so we've got to do something about that. Same thing, if you're going to have kids misbehave and it triggers you somehow, and you come back at them stronger, or you think it's just blatant disrespect or whatever, you've got to work on what's going on inside of you. Because if you're not under control, if you're not in control of how you're feeling, you're not going to be able to deal with what they're feeling. If you can't control your actions, how are you going to control their actions? You can't. So you got to start with you. You got to start with, at the beginning, what's going on inside of you. So when it comes down to it, this is a quote I saw. 95% of people who have offended me have no clue that they've offended me. And I think that applies to class too, is that majority of time that a kid's misbehaving in my class has absolutely nothing to do with me. They're not disrespecting me. They're not valuing me. It's none of those things. It's they had a hard conversation with their girlfriend last period and they're pissed. Oh, they just bombed the test in another class and they're just miserable. Or they've got the most exciting party coming up and they just got to talk to their friends about it. It's not about me. It really isn't. It's just what's going on in their lives. And so when I make it personal and I get more worked up about it because it's personal to me, that makes the conversation, the management of it, a lot more difficult. So I want to identify a couple types of reactions. So for distractions. So I put them in kind of two categories: non-behavior distractions and behavior distractions. So non-behavior would be things like pep rallies, assemblies, sports dismissals, kids are out sick, prom, whatever. Those things are all non-behavior. And for me, you got to get ahead of them. You got to deal with the elephant in the room. That's why I got a picture of an elephant here. You got to deal with the elephant in the room. The assembly's coming up. There's a pep rally on Friday. That beforehand. And that kids are going to be dressed down. That they're going to be a little bit hyper and a little bit harder to control. This beforehand. Classes are short. Well, set the expectations beforehand. Have the conversation the day before. It's all right, guys, I know tomorrow's pep rally. I know, you're excited about this. I'm excited about it. And we're going to have class tomorrow. It's school day. We're having class tomorrow. I know it's only 35 minutes, but we're going to come in and we're going to do da-da-da-da-da. Okay? And so I know it's short, so I need you to be on the same page. We're going to be doing schoolwork. You're getting ahead of it. Okay? Or another common distraction is they got a big US history test next period. And they're all wanting to study and they got stuff out and they're not really paying attention to what I'm saying. That's not going to fly. So I'm going to get ahead of it. I'm going to say, all right, guys, I know you got this big test next period. Couple of things. One, if I see anything related to US history or anything that's not chemistry, it's mine till the end of the period. Two, if you focus and we get through this quickly, any free time we have at the end of the period is yours to use as you want. If you want to study for this test, you can. If you want to work on your homework in this class, you can. And then I get a win-win. I get a really focused, amazing class period, and they get some time to study for their test. And it works because I got ahead of it. Sports dismissals. Hey, I know a bunch of you are going to be out tomorrow, leaving early for the basketball game. Remember, there's a quiz scheduled tomorrow. You need to come in before you leave to take that quiz. I'm not going to hunt you down. I'll be here at 7:30. So you can come in before school, take it. I'll be in here during lunch today. You can take it during lunch period or what, and you just lay it out there. You let them know, and you let them know what's going on. This is one of the reasons why I would have drop quizzes, because I'm like, hey, and if you miss, it's your drop quiz for the quarter, because you'll have a 0 if you don't take it before you leave. And so that works. That motivates kids to do what they need to do. They're high schoolers. You're talking 16, 17, 18-year-olds in chemistry. Put some responsibility on them. Make them responsible to come in. Get ahead of it. Set some expectations and rules that work for you. Don't chase them. That just isn't worth the headache. But do it. Some distractions are so big that you just need to scrap your lesson that day. Things like 9/11. I had a death of a former student's father that impacted a class. And those kids were really, really close to this girl, and they loved her dad. He was just an awesome guy who was involved in the school. And they had left the school the previous year. And the kids were like, hey, can we go be with her and miss your class? I'm like, go. It's more important for you to go be with your friend who's grieving and hurting than it is for you to be in my classroom. And so sometimes non-behavior distractions we just have to go with because they're so big. So we keep that in mind. Because once again, I'm all about pursuing my kids' hearts. Because once again, if I win their hearts, I'm going to win their minds. It's critical. So behavior. Think about your why. Why are you even cracking down on this behavior? Is it because that kid disrespected you? Is it because it's a power struggle between you and that kid? For me, when I started seeing that my job as a teacher was not to put my thumb down on whoever's trying to thwart me and keeping me from teaching, maintain my authority. But when I saw that my job as a teacher was to maintain a safe learning environment for the other kids in the classroom, cracking down on behavior issues became a lot easier for me. Because it's not so much about me and that kid, it's more about me and the other 20 plus kids in the room. I'm protecting their ability to learn by addressing this behavior issue. And so I do what we call boundaries and consequences. So I give the student a choice. Like I did this for a class one time. I did it for a whole class because they were just chatty, and it was the whole class. And I was like, all right, guys, whoa. You're making it very difficult for me to teach effectively. So you can choose to keep talking, and I'm going to stop teaching and sit down at the desk, and you can get your books out and you can figure this out and write down what you need to write down on your own. Or you can choose to be quiet, and I'll finish teaching this to you. And actually, I had it happen amazingly. It was 2 back-to-back periods. The first period that did it, they chose the second. They chose to be quiet, and their consequence was I finished teaching it. The second period chose to keep talking. I chose to sit down. Now, I will caveat this. I knew I had an administrator that would support me, and I could get away with that. Depending upon your administrators, depending upon your parents, you may not be able to do something quite that extreme. And I understand it was an extreme example, but it worked. I didn't have talking problems for the rest of the year because the kids knew I meant business. I gave them a choice, they made their choice, and then the appropriate consequence came after. And it wasn't about me and them. It wasn't me about me exerting their authority. It's like, hey, it's my authority is I'm giving you a choice. Here's your choice. You can choose to behave and stop distracting other people, or you can choose to go stand in the hall. That's their choice. Then when they make their behavior decision, that's their choice. It's like, all right, go stand out in the hall. Then when you go through the consequence, I think it's important to have conversations with those kids about what's going on with them. Be curious about why they're choosing to act that way. Some of them, they're just seeking attention. They really just want you to give them love. Sometimes it's crap that's going on in their family. Sometimes it's a fight. They had a disagreement with this other student that started 3 periods ago, and it's spilling over into your class. Because if I send a kid out in the hall, I'm not going to leave them out there the whole period. I'm going to kind of get to my next stopping point, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to talk with them. And I'm going to express curiosity about what's going on with them and try to understand them. Because once again, I'm trying to win their hearts. Because if I can win their hearts, if I can help them understand that I'm with them and for them, my behavior issues are going to drop. I'm not going to deal with it as often. Now, that's not always the case. You're going to have those kids that are like going to have to go see the principal or dean. You've got kids who are going to need detentions. You've got kids who are going to need, that just happens. Sometimes you just have those kids. But when I give them a choice and let them choose, and then when I have a conversation with them about the negative consequences they've received, I'm treating them like an adult, and I'm interacting with them like an adult. And teenagers respond really, really well to that. We'll get to that more in a later lesson. But teenagers respond to that. So I'm showing them respect, something they don't always get. And so they respond because I'm just pursuing their heart in my classroom management. And I think that's critical. So, action step. Decide ahead of time what policies you can implement for distractions. So that would be things like pep rallies, sports dismissals. Decide on a policy early on. So for me, like a homework policy that works for me is 24 hours late grace. So let's say you had a football game, or not football game, those are on Fridays. Let's say you had a basketball game on a Wednesday and you come in on Thursday, you don't have your homework. You have 24 hours to get to me. So the end of the day, Friday. If I don't see it by the end of the day, Friday, you don't get to turn it in. And that works for me. Because I've learned if I don't see it within 24 hours, I'm not going to see it anyway. And once again, these are high schoolers. I'm not going to hunt them down saying, hey, I got a missing homework assignment here from 3 weeks ago. I don't have time to do that. They're high school kids. And once again, a few times that they get dinged for that, they learn to get it in within 24 hours. And so I'm setting those policies ahead of time, getting ahead of it. And then I try to think about what choices you want to give your kids. What discipline works well, and it does vary from kid to kid. Some kids, having to sit, at a different table during lunch would be a horrible punishment. Other kids having to come in early and sit in your room and just do nothing would be a punishment. Other kids, it's detention. Other kids, it's calling mom and dad. Whatever it may be, it varies, but think about what those choices are that you want to give, and kind of have those in your mind beforehand. Because when you're in the midst of a behavior issue, we're not always thinking our clear because our tempers get up. And when we get aggravated and angry, we don't always think the most clearly. And so it's important that we kind of have these ideas beforehand. Hey, what consequences are we going to get? Am I going to send this kid out to the hall, or am I going to do this? You kind of have that in your mind beforehand. And I think that'll be incredibly helpful going into those situations. So that's lesson 6. See you in lesson 7.